It's getting close to that time, summertime. Got to start drafting those fantasy football leagues, looking at some fantasy rankings, starting with the quarterbacks around the NFL and projecting maybe some, I think some big-time breakout quarterbacks in 2025. On today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson, as always, at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. By the way, hit us on Twitter. Get those questions in for this week's mailbag episode. You can always drop a question on YouTube as well. And, of course, please subscribe. And I know a lot of everyday listeners aren't even subscribed. So subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you are listening to this podcast. If you're new to the program, welcome. It's what we do every day, breaking it down, even throughout the offseason, the entire NFL. Having a lot of fun doing it. So thanks for coming along for the ride, and subscribe everywhere you can. If you already subbed up, hit the thumbs up, let us know that you stopped by, and drop some questions on us for this week's mailbag. We're talking fantasy a little bit. We're going to go through some fantasy positions here, getting everyone primed for their fantasy drafts, getting your brain there. And I was hanging out with one of my buddies over the weekend, and he was asking me about my keeper in one of our keepers leagues. And I was like, dude, I don't even remember who's on my roster. I got to get back.
Yeah, it's about that time.
Like, it's that time of year. So we're going to utilize Pro Football Focus's fantasy rankings, also have ESPN ADP to reference as well, and go through what the landscape is for quarterbacks in 2025 and maybe find some breakout candidates as well. This episode is brought to you by Gametime, by the way. Love Gametime, the Gametime app. And if you download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Okay, well, there's a new guy at the top of fantasy football rankings. And I know Jayden Daniels had a phenomenal rookie year, Matt. Is he QB1 now going forward? Is that what we've got with Jayden Daniels? Because right now, PFF has him ranked as the 20th overall player in fantasy football and QB1 for 2025 going into his sophomore season in Washington.
Yeah, and you mentioned this time of year, you don't remember who your keepers are, so like in my fantasy landscape, dynasty rookie drafts really, really pick up right after the NFL draft. And there's a couple week period that you're always going through those, and they're always slow drafts. So it's not like, a draft takes 3-4 days, et cetera. And then, you get into kind of mini camp season, and especially with my affiliation with the Steelers, I'm down there, and that's the talk of the town and blah, blah, blah. And now we've hit this lull. I mean, we're frankly finally in the off season. Like Monday to me was day one of the NFL off season, where there'll be some things. Unfortunately, a player or two will get arrested. There'll be some extensions. Maybe there's a trade, but all in all, there's not much news. And I think that's when fantasy starts to really get on people's brains. Like all of a sudden you start to see a lot more fantasy articles pop up. And that's when I start to kind of like dig into the redraft stuff. Like, what are the experts saying? Let's look at some rankings. That's why I wanted to do that today, because these aren't our rankings. They're not my rankings. We just pulled up a generic list off Pro Football Focus. And you start to say, am I willing to take one of the top guys, or do I want to wait? And I'm looking at this quarterback class saying, man, a lot of these rookies last year might be breakout fantasy candidates. A lot of mobile guys, things like that. Daniels doesn't qualify because you got to pay a heavy price for him. But to me, Josh Allen would still be my one. I mean, he's just more proven. And there's a Ford guy tier at the top. And I guess you could kind of shake those four into a bag, and any which way they fell, I would understand if that's, who you ended up with as your number one. But for me, Allen's the guy I trust the most. And part of it's just because C.J. Stroud took a little bit of a step back last year. All the defense coordinators in the world, especially that are on his schedule or in his division, are scheming up for Daniels' weaknesses. And their offense looks really good. Their defense doesn't. So the script doesn't worry me. But I would probably take the bird in the hand with Allen and maybe Lamar as well over Daniels.
You mentioned strategy there a little bit, because traditionally the strategy was there's enough good quarterbacks and you're in a 12-team league, and it's still, 12-team leagues are still pretty deep, and you can find a quarterback late. So you wait on quarterbacks and you load up on wide receivers and running backs and all that stuff early. And that's how I'd always done it. And
usually my move, right?
Yeah, my one home league that I played for so long, and I play a lot fewer fantasy leagues than I used to. And I used to write fantasy blurbs, and it's funny how little fantasy I play these days. And like my mind's not on it like it used to be when I was younger. Really, becoming a dad changed a lot of my fantasy. It's like, those things that you just got to cut out of your life. Like, how important is spending a lot of time researching fantasy football to me right now? Not that important. I'll go outside and play with my kid. So I'm in a lot fewer leagues, but I started having some bad finishes in my my league I've been playing in for decades. And last year I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the early quarterback thing, and I drafted Josh Allen. I had the number one pick in the draft. This go great for me because it started with Christian McCaffrey. He was hurt all year, and then coming around the 2-3 turn, I drafted the first quarterback, and it was Josh Allen, and he carried my team. And it's like I kind of came around. I was like, you know what, early quarterback, if you get one of these stud guys, might be the way to go these days. But then now with the influx of young talent, maybe we'll switch back to the other way, because right now I'm kind of in team early QB where I wasn't for a very long time. And I wonder if, maybe you have to wait one more year for a lot of these guys to hit, but it's starting to look like a pretty deep fantasy group of quarterbacks to where if you do get the 12th or 13th guy, you feel pretty good about it. And the 12th or 13th guy this year might become QB5 next year.
Yeah, 100%. And you're obviously do this for a living and are more dialed in than you implied there in the fantasy world. But I've got a buddy that's in our league. It's one of my best friends. He's a general contractor, and he's the least dialed in of our 12 owners, you know, and I always tell him, I'm like, take a quarterback high. It kind of just, it takes the thinking out of it. They probably won't bust. And we've all been there, like these top four for PFF is Daniels, Allen, Jackson, Hurts. And like I said, you could probably put them in any order and I wouldn't fight you too much, especially the tush push still being relevant. But we've all set our lineup Sunday morning or, Saturday or whatever, and you look at who you're playing. And if you don't have one of those four and you're playing against one of those four, you immediately think, man, I'm kind of at a disadvantage here, no matter what else you got.
So the ADP still agrees with you, Matt. And Josh Allen is still the highest drafted quarterback, even though he's ranked QB2 according to PFF. So according to ADP, average draft position at ESPN, Josh Allen's still the first quarterback, 21.7 ADP. Then right after him at 22 is Lamar Jackson. Then it goes Jayden Daniels 3, Jalen Hurts 4. But as far as PFF's rankings of them this season, Jayden Daniels looks like the screaming value there because he's actually projected to be QB1 here. Then it's Allen 2, Lamar Jackson 3, and Jalen Hurts 4.
Okay. Do you have a preference of those four?
I'm with you on Allen.
Okay.
Because he just kind of, and Jackson, just more proven. They, burn the candle at both ends kind of with the throwing ability and with Allen, and then being able to, plunge the ball into the end zone and his rushing ability. And obviously, for those folks that don't play fantasy football a lot and they're hearing us rank these quarterbacks, a quarterback that runs the football is more valuable in fantasy life than real life.
Times 1,000.
Yeah.
Like when we get to number 5 here, Joe Burrow's the consensus 5. And yeah, he'll scramble here and there, and maybe he'll end up with a rushing touchdown. But he really has to throw for like 40 touchdowns to end up being quarterback 5 when it's all said and done.
Yeah,
and it's possible, but that's living on the edge. It's not a cheat code like the running guys.
The way this team's built and his receivers, I'd probably bet that he does that. But he has to do that because he doesn't get the extra value of being a running back. And I think Jalen Hurts is kind of the one where it's like, he's a good quarterback that won the Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts, right? But you wouldn't expect him to be like, in his own tier with the top guys. You would expect him to maybe be in the next tier of guys. But fantasy relevancy with, being able to run the football, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns is huge for someone like Jalen Hurts. So if you're looking for the next star, that's why Jayden Daniels is so good, because not only was he great right out of the box and he can throw the heck out of the football, he can score you touchdowns with his arm and his legs, which is huge for fantasy.
Absolutely. And people probably know this. I mean, listen to the show that the Eagles are like the run heaviest team in the league, but the fact that Hurts doesn't throw for a ton of yards doesn't hurt him in fantasy because he's a big part of why they're one of the run heaviest teams in the league. And he also benefited from Barkley getting tackled at the 1 like 100 times last year too, and he's going to get all those touchdowns.
All right, so that's tier 1 of the fantasy quarterback market in 2025. Who is tier 2? Who should be in tier 1? And breakout quarterbacks for 2025. I think it's a pretty good list of those guys. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime and the Gametime app. And there's nothing like the playoff atmosphere. Love watching NHL, NBA playoffs, intensity, late game, heroics. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live. And this year's matchups delivering for sure, getting to the end of these seasons. And of course, Major League Baseball every single year. My San Francisco Giants made a huge trade for Rafael Devers. So I'm excited to go find some tickets and watch him play in San Francisco, go drive across the bridge. And with Gametime, prices on the app actually drop closer to the start of the game, whether it's tip off or puck drop or first pitch. And with killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, my favorite part, Gametime is a total game changer. And man, with the Gametime guarantee, your tickets are 100% authentic and will arrive on time. And it's so important. Gametime, I've never used them to grab NFL seats, but man, I've used Gametime for Major League Baseball. I've used Gametime for tons of concert tickets, comedy shows, whatever it is. You got to have Gametime in your pocket if you're a sports fan. And I know you are because you're listening to this podcast. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, so tier 1 quarterbacks. Again, as PFF ranks them, it's Jayden Daniels, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. Then it's the group of Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, and then guys like Baker Mayfield and Brock Purdy and Justin Fields. Some of those guys. But, Mahomes and Burrow are top-tier quarterbacks. Talk to me about Patrick Mahomes, because how is he not a top-tier fantasy quarterback? He can run the ball a little bit as well. He's one of the best quarterbacks, maybe the best quarterback of this generation.
So one thing I wanted to say before we went to break is I probably will never be the team that takes quarterback 1. I'll be happy with whatever the 4th one is on the board or 3rd one is on the board. If I'm going to go big, if I'm going to invest in an early round tier 1 of those 4 guys. For me, I think Burrow does stand alone at 5, but for what he costs, that scares me. Just because even if he throws for 1,000,000 yards, he has to throw for 1,000,000 touchdowns to justify being the 5th quarterback. And there's just a lot of room for error. Mahomes, I have mixed feelings on, because I really feel like he could be in store after, by his standards, some down years, that he could be in store for, that's the league MVP. Right. Like that guy's incredible,
We just talked about what Burrow has to do, but Patrick Mahomes' floor is so high. And would anybody be shocked if Patrick Mahomes threw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns out of, next year just went crazy? Like, he's got that in him. And I think the way the team play the Chiefs is a certain way. There's a big reason why, but to me, the smoking value in all of this is just Patrick Mahomes as QB6, and you're getting him, over a round later than Burrow and a couple rounds later than the guys at the top.
Because he could go nuclear. I mean, he doesn't run as much in the regular season as people think. He saves it for the playoffs. But still, I mean, Kelsey might be a shell of himself, but he'll still catch a ton of touchdowns. Rice, Worthy, Marquise Brown, they haven't been an explosive offense, but it doesn't mean they can't be. I would rather wait on Mahomes than jump in on Burrow. And then to be honest, after those guys, I'm not disagreeing with PFF of who their 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys should be. I mean, I think that's a fine ranking. I'm not invested in any of those guys. They look the same to me as like quarterback 15.
And this is where things start to differ with PFF rankings and the ESPN ADP too, after those top 6 guys. And PFF loves Baker Mayfield. He's QB7 here, and he's actually got a top 100. Yeah. So you got Baker Mayfield 7, Brock Purdy 8, then Justin Fields, now a New York Jet, is QB9, and JJ McCarthy, which this is frustrating.
I don't see that.
This is frustrating for me because he was going to be my sleeper guy in a lot of leagues.
Okay.
He's one of the top 12 drafted quarterback, QB10, JJ McCarthy. That one surprises me a little bit. Now his ADP isn't that high, but if he's starting to get ranked this high, then he's going to be starting to get drafted pretty high in a lot of leagues.
And I imagine ADP is a very small sample size because no one's doing their home drafts now on ESPN. You know what I mean? Like
you get a lot of expert leagues or a lot of those dynasty leagues drafting already right now. A lot of the home leagues don't start drafting until there's a lot of people don't want to get their guy hurt in preseason, so they want to draft like Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, that's when we always do it, and there are best ball stuff out there and underdog and all that kind of stuff, which is fun. I mean, I urge people to give it a try, but that's a different way of looking at it. McCarthy, I have not done a ton of fantasy homework, redraft stuff, but this is by far the highest I've seen him ranked. And he does run, and it's an amazing system. And Darnold ended up right in this neighborhood last year. Why can't McCarthy? I mean, I have no problem with the ranking, but again, I don't think I'm paying the price for Mayfield and Purdy because they have to throw 1 million touchdowns to justify this cost. Fields, how much will they run them? Maybe a ton. I would imagine much more than Pittsburgh did. And then I don't know that I can take McCarthy that high, considering even some of the young quarterbacks, the Drake Mays of the world or the Bo Nixes that run probably more that are way cheaper. So I don't think I'm investing in this. What is it, like 100-ish ADP neighborhood of quarterbacks? I'm either all in or waiting like crazy. I think
waiting. Then you're playing the game where you draft two guys. You draft McCarthy and Jordan Love or something like that. And end up shaking out. Jordan Love actually a little disrespect. QB 17. I mean, I'm skipping over.
I'm buying that.
Yeah, I love that as far as the rankings go. And his ADP is actually higher. Looking at the dollar value too is higher than some of these other guys, but a little disrespected by PFF with Jordan Love here. QB 17, all the receivers they got there, adding a first rounder on top of it too. So yeah, give me a Jordan Love at that ADP. I would have thought he'd have been up here at QB 10 area.
I think he played injured much of the year too. Like I think there's more running in his future. Maybe his best football's ahead of him too. I'm all over that.
So McCarthy's 10.
Okay.
Trevor Lawrence 11. And we'll stop here on Kyler Murray at QB 12. Where are you on Kyler Murray going into 2025, Matt? It feels like a kind of a pivotal year. It was like, who are you going to be? Are you going to be this guy? Or are you going to go into another level? Because I feel like it's in there still, but you kind of shouldn't wait for it. And obviously he can run the football as well. As we're talking about a fantasy quarterback.
Yeah. And if we would have this exact show 1 year ago and 2 years ago, I've been targeting Murray like crazy, and it's not quite worked out. Doesn't run quite as much as you think, doesn't throw quite as many touchdowns as you think. McBride had like no touchdowns last year. Like that's going to change, but still, I mean, James Conner ends up running it in a lot, and his yardage numbers aren't quite as good as you think. But he is kind of an enigma in that if any of these, I mean, he's right at the top of the list with like a Lamar of. Could he be a top 3 running and passing yards guy? Both. He's one of the only ones that could do that.
Right. Yeah. It's like Justin Fields has never
been the
thrower of that. Right. He's a dynamic runner. Could he start to creep up and be better as a thrower as he ages? And I could see that. But, it's hard to project him more. So when you start talking about that area, really, you start with quarterback 7 and Baker Mayfield and Purdy and Fields and McCarthy and Trevor Lawrence and Kyler Murray. And then Bo Nix is another one as well. I would think Bo Nix, just because he's already done it and his ADP is higher. In fact, his ADP at ESPN right now is higher than Brock Purdy. So he's actually QB 8 ADP is Bo Nix. But as far as the rankings, so that's a big difference between PFF and I assume the ESPN rankings are probably pretty close to their ADP because people kind of draft on the on a certain platform and they're looking at those rankings from that platform. Bo Nix QB 13 rank, but QB 8 right behind Baker Mayfield as far as ADP goes. I would probably not draft Bo Nix because I would want to get a discount on one of the second-year quarterbacks potentially, like JJ McCarthy, that you can get later. But what do you think about Bo Nix? Because year 2, could he hit another level as a fantasy quarterback?
Possibly, because he runs a lot and he has some easy completions all the time. I mean, Peyton quarterbacks complete so many passes to running backs that inflates their quarterback, their quarterback production for fantasy too, because they're not hard completions. But it's funny, like I didn't look at his ESPN ADP. I just looked at his rank on here and I thought, ooh, I'm buying him as quarterback 11 through 14 neighborhood, but I'm not buying him a quarterback 8. Like that's a little ahead of ourselves here, right?
I think we're kind of seeing it the same way is, okay, well, let's let everybody else draft quarterbacks 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then now we'll see who's left for quarterback 12. If that's Bo Nix, that's Bo Nix. Okay. If that's JJ McCarthy, if that's Trevor Lawrence, you start to, you kind of just let the league decide which one of those guys, because you don't want to be the one that's drafting 7, 8, 9.
That's kind of my initial thoughts, very subject to change, is either invest in the top 4, maybe you hang around till Mahomes is a value, or I'm the last guy taking a quarterback,
There are some big name quarterbacks that we have not mentioned yet.
There's a couple I like that are low on this list.
Right. And so there's some fun. This is maybe the year to start waiting again on quarterback. Draft a couple of these guys and see who turns out. If you've got the stomach for it, if you got the stomach for playing the different quarterback every week game, I understand. If you don't have the stomach for that, let's talk about those quarterbacks and who the future stars are potentially next. So Jim Harbaugh and the offense in Los Angeles with the Chargers obviously hurts Justin Herbert and his value as a fantasy quarterback. He is all the way down at QB 16 here, and his ADP is a little higher than that. But when I look at this area and I see Caleb Williams at quarterback 14 with all the talent that they've got at receiver now in Chicago and the offensive coordinator there, Jared Goff QB 15, you got Justin Herbert 16, Jordan Love 17. CJ Stroud 18, and then Michael Penix
was a lot higher a year ago.
I'm gonna have one of those quarterbacks on all my teams, even if I already drafted a quarterback. Like, I love this area. Williams, Herbert, Love, Stroud, Penix. I mean, if Stroud or Penix or JJ McCarthy or Caleb Williams is your number 2 quarterback, I mean, that's phenomenal.
I'm gonna even take it one name further on this list because my favorite value is Drake May. I mean, I think he runs for 500 yards. He was highly productive on a per game basis anyway. And now he has somewhat of the O-line and weapons. Penix to me reminds me of Jameis Winston, and that's a good thing for fantasy. I don't care if he throws picks or doesn't run that much because he throws bombs and he's aggressive and, just chucks the ball down the field. I mentioned it a year ago. CJ Stroud was going like as the 6th quarterback off the board. He doesn't run, but I don't think he got worse. Right. I like this neighborhood a lot. Give me 2 of these dudes.
Right. And you want to talk about breakouts. Michael Penix could be that guy. And
he could be, yeah.
Here's the thing with Penix, JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams, all the year 2 guys.
I love the year 2 guys.
Not as much Drake May, but just looking at not only, year 2 quarterback, super talented guys, drafted high, they have awesome weapons to throw to as well.
Yeah, right.
Maybe not quite as much Bo Nix, although he's got a fine group. Sutton and Mims and some young guys, Troy Franklin. They drafted Pat Bryant in the 3rd round this year. So some development needed with some of those wide receivers there for him to throw to. But when you talk about what Caleb Williams is throwing to in Chicago, what Michael Penix has tons of weapons there to throw to in Atlanta. And I mean, that's like, I love
running. They also running ability too. None of them are stiffs,
Yeah, exactly. And Drake May has some running ability and some athleticism and obviously a ton of talent. And we haven't even talked about Dak Prescott, who's another guy.
That's the other one that's like screaming at me. Like they're not going to run the ball like they used to. I mean, they got Pickens and Lamb,
QB 21, we're getting into the territory where somebody might not be drafted at all. Like there might be a team that just doesn't draft the backup quarterback.
To me, if you give me like May and Prescott at the end of the draft, okay, and I'm loaded everywhere else.
Yeah, you start Dak in those matchups early in the year, see what you have in Drake May. Maybe by the end of the year, Drake May is looking like an easy top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, again, this year just screams, don't be the guy that takes the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th quarterback off the board. Top 4, cool. But otherwise, I'm in this neighborhood. I mean, I don't think Dallas is going to be a run-heavy team. I mean, look at their running backs. I mean, I know the O-line's built that way, but they got big-time weapons now. Prescott doesn't run that much, but he could throw for as many touchdowns as Burrow. I mean, I'm hesitant to say that much, but it's not that much different, right?
I know you like Drake May.
Mhm.
Of the year 2 quarterbacks, obviously Jayden Daniels aside.
Yeah.
Which one, take ADP out of it where you have to take them. Let's say, okay, they're all there and you have this one pick and you have to use it. Which guy do you like?
It would be May. Yeah, I mean, I know that he's cheaper than those other guys. I think he's a super underrated runner, and he's very willing to do it. He was often under pressure and just scrambled, so that part of it I like quite a bit. I think his cast is noticeably better. I don't know if Diggs will be ready or not, but he's an NFL receiver, and he actually has some protection now. I really like all the group, though. Like, if you told me I ended up with 2 second-year quarterbacks late, no matter who they are, really, McCarthy, Nix, Penix, whoever, okay, these young guys have athletic upside.
I'm really annoyed by PFF ranking JJ McCarthy so high because he's going to be my guy, and I'm shocked that he's ranked ahead of all these guys. I would have figured he'd right here with Penix, behind Stroud, behind Love, behind all those guys.
I tend to agree. That shocks me they're that high on him. I'm not that high on him, but if you're getting him in this neighborhood we're talking about, in this like Penix stack land, which might be what happens in your home league when it's said.
I think you probably will, because looking at ADP, he's not there. This is kind of an outlier where PFF has him ranked, which is frustrating for me. So hopefully everyone doesn't draft off their PFF rankings if they want to. If they hope that everyone else in their league doesn't draft off PFF rankings if they want to.
So I want to get into a couple of these super late guys that might not even get drafted at all. But I heard an interesting thing on the fantasy podcast just the other day that AI might greatly change fantasy drafts, because Joe Blow in your league that knows nothing might just ask AI, who do I take? And they'll tell you.
And AI might really improve mock drafts as well.
Yeah.
So you have a better idea of what will happen in a draft, because you can go into a mock draft and you kind of have this bad computer spit out like this draft, it wouldn't really happen this way. So it doesn't really prepare you that well for the real draft. Maybe mock drafts will get a lot better too.
I think it's an interesting, like every walk of life, AI is changing things, but I could see fantasy getting changed heavily. Like the dude that doesn't know anything, who should I start this week, AI, or who should I draft right now? Mm-hmm. And the host of that podcast looked at it in a different way, saying, I hope everyone does that, because then they'll be chalky and I'll get my guys.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because there's a few draft analysts that are the most popular in the world. And if they have a favorite sleeper, then that becomes everyone's favorite sleeper. And there's
no sleepers anymore. Yeah, Matthew Berry's sleeper doesn't get past anybody anymore.
I was in on this sleeper, 4 months ago. And then all of a sudden it's Labor Day. And now my buddy who's in construction that doesn't follow this at all, now it's his favorite sleeper. And he didn't know his name 3 months ago.
Never would have picked him. The backup running back on some team no one's ever heard of that was a 6th round pick.
That's quarterback. I always loved having fantasy drafts earlier, because I thought that was a big advantage.
Give a little more of an edge
before you see that rookie 3rd round running back play in the preseason and everyone puts them up in their rankings.
So a couple of these guys that are super late, I would still have interest in Tua, even though he doesn't run at all. I mean, he's been pretty efficient as a passer and has some nice weapons. Cam Ward, they're going to be losing a lot. He's going to run. And then a name that's not on here, because they kind of imply that Richardson's going to be the starter. Give me Daniel Jones. I don't care if he stinks in real life. They have a lot of weapons, and he's going to run a ton.
Bryce Young's not dead yet.
It's not bad either.
He's QB 22, and if you look statistically at the second half of the year, and I said, here's the second half for CJ Stroud, here's the second half for Bryce Young, the better quarterback might have been Bryce Young. So
first round receiver,
some more talent there. I don't know if I'd bet that he's going to be a superstar fantasy quarterback for you or a superstar NFL quarterback, but he's not dead yet. And again, like that just shows the depth of this, and someone who's worth rostering as your QB2 at least, and might have a lot more upside than he's getting credit for. Cam Ward, rookie quarterback, could he?
Yeah, I would be intrigued.
On the scene, he can obviously run the ball and throw the heck out of it. Could he be this year's Jayden Daniels? It's not impossible. And you got
not impossible.
Matthew Stafford's not going to get drafted.
Matthew Stafford's not going to get drafted. He might throw 40 touchdowns.
In the NFC, he's not going to get drafted.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. What's funny, though, is there are no sleepers. Sleeper's a dead word. I mean, that's almost like something when we were kids before the internet. Like I got, the deep on my fantasy magazine, I'm going to circle this guy or whatever. Yeah. Everyone knows everything. But breakouts are a real thing. Could Bryce Young be the breakout this year? Throws 30 touchdowns, 40 or 400 yards rushing, turns into a legit dude. Could be,
Absolutely. Could Bryce Young be more valuable in next year's fantasy leagues than Baker Mayfield coming in? Baker Mayfield's QB7 right now.
He could get drafted ahead of him a year from now. Yes. Right. I mean, I don't think that's a crazy story to write.
Mm-hmm.
And I urge people to do that. Like, could you tell yourself a story that 365 days from now, you have player X ahead of player Y that's going 10 rounds ahead of him now?
Yes. Yeah. So,
and I love Mayfield, but if he only throws 22 touchdowns, he won't be a top 12 quarterback next year's draft, If
I have to draft him somewhere between 77.2 ADP and 98, where he's ranked here by PFF, he won't be on any of my rosters.
None.
In a wide receiver in that spot.
Absolutely. Give me something else. And that's where he should. I mean, I'm not even saying their rankings are screwed up. I mean, he should be there, but I'm not paying that price for that,
Exactly. Let us know who's your favorite breakout, sleeper, star quarterback. What's your fantasy football strategy in 2025 at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL? Get those questions in as well in the YouTube comments for this week's mailbag. Back tomorrow, right here, Peacock and Williamson.